It was supposed to be a routine rescue, just another day on the job. But when he saved her life, he unknowingly set the stage for his past to come crashing back in. Amid the roaring flames of a burning car, the firefighter risks everything to pull the woman to safety. But as the dust settles and the fire burns out, a figure from his past, the one person he never thought he'd see again, appears in the crowd, turning his life upside down. Welcome to Untold Narratives. Let's get started. Jack Harrison had been a firefighter for almost 10 years, a job that had given him a sense of purpose and stability, until recently. He had always been the reliable one, the guy who showed up when things got messy, the person people could count on when their world was falling apart. But lately, it felt like his own life was falling apart. The weight of his past, the failed relationships, the broken promises, the regret, was starting to drag him down. Before he became a firefighter, Jack had been just another guy, in a small town with big dreams of making something of himself. But somewhere between the shift work and endless calls, life had a way of passing him by. And then there was Sarah. She was the one that got away, the love he never fully let go of. She was everything he ever wanted, and yet, he couldn't bring himself to make the commitment. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was just bad timing. But after that night, the night they had their biggest fight, the one that ended things for good, Jack's life had become a series of isolated moments, each more disconnected than the last. His heart wasn't in his work the way it used to be, and every call now felt like a reminder of the things he could never fix. That night, Jack was supposed to have the evening off. He'd planned to go out for a drink, maybe call up a friend to get some mindless distraction. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. The call came in at exactly the wrong moment, just as he was settling into the solitude of his apartment. A car accident. A burning vehicle with someone trapped inside. It was the kind of call that never let you rest, the kind that demanded everything from you. As Jack raced toward the scene, all he could think about was how everything in his life had become a mess, how every plan he made seemed to fall apart, and how just once, he wished for something to go right. When Jack arrived at the scene, the flames were already licking at the side of the car, and the smoke was so thick, he could barely see through it. The screech of sirens, the shouts of the police, the chaos, he blocked it all out, as he focused on what needed to be done. Time was running out. The woman inside was unconscious, trapped behind the crumpled steering wheel. Without a second thought, Jack threw himself into the flames. His instincts kicked in. There was no time to hesitate. He managed to get the door open, just enough to squeeze inside. His arms ached from the weight of the woman, but the adrenaline made everything seem manageable. He had to get her out, had to save her. The heat was unbearable, but he kept going. The minutes felt like hours, as he fought to free her from the wreckage. Finally, with one last Herculean effort, he pulled her from the car, carrying her to safety, just as the flames erupted around the vehicle. The woman was alive, but barely. Jack was gasping for air, his own clothes singed from the heat, but he didn't stop. He called for help, shouting for paramedics, and stayed by her side, as they worked to stabilize her. She was in bad shape, but at least she was breathing. In the chaos, Jack didn't notice the familiar face in the crowd, until it was too late. Sarah. His ex, the one person he never expected to see again. She was standing there, her eyes wide with disbelief, looking at him as though she hadn't seen him in years. And in a way, she hadn't. Not since that night, the night she left him. Jack's stomach dropped, and for a moment, the world around him felt like it was moving in slow motion. He stood frozen, the weight of the moment crashing over him. The shock of seeing her again was enough to knock him off balance. She hadn't changed, at least not on the outside. She still had that look in her eyes, the one that made him feel like he was the only person in the world who mattered. But now, seeing her there, standing just a few feet away, felt like a punch to the gut. He hadn't expected this. He had no idea what she was doing here. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't. Sarah's gaze shifted from him to the woman he had just saved, and Jack could see the concern in her eyes. But there was something else too. Something harder. A tension, a history between them, that neither could ignore. The paramedics were already loading the woman into the ambulance, but Jack couldn't take his eyes off Sarah. "You." Sarah's voice trembled slightly, as though unsure whether she should speak at all. Jack swallowed, his throat dry. What are you doing here? Her expression tightened. I heard the crash. I was passing by when I saw the car. I had to make sure. She trailed off, unsure of how to finish the sentence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jack's mind was racing. He wasn't ready for this. Not now. Not here. Jack's mind was swirling. He couldn't deal with this. Not now. Not when everything was still so fresh, so raw. He had just saved a woman's life. That was supposed to be his focus. But now, Sarah's sudden appearance had thrown him completely off balance. His instincts screamed at him to turn away, to focus on the job at hand, to move forward. But a part of him, a very big part, was pulled to her. He couldn't ignore the way his heart reacted to seeing her again. The unresolved emotions from their past, his mistakes, her anger, their broken relationship, flooded back into his mind. Was this the right time to reopen old wounds? Was it worth the risk of revisiting everything that went wrong? And yet, the thought of walking away from her again felt just as painful. The woman he'd saved was still in danger, still needed medical attention, but his heart was tangled in the chaos of his past. He felt torn between the immediate responsibility of ensuring the woman got the help she needed, and the temptation to confront the feelings he had buried for so long. In that moment, Jack wasn't just a firefighter. He was a man struggling with his own past, trying to figure out whether helping the woman, or helping Sarah, was the right thing to do. The following days were a blur for Jack. He had visited the woman, who was recovering in the hospital, more times than he could count. Her name was Emily, and her life had been hanging by a thread when he pulled her from that burning car. He knew he was just doing his job, but something about her kept him coming back. She was grateful, of course, but there was a deeper connection that he couldn't quite put his finger on. It wasn't until one afternoon, when Emily's condition had stabilized enough for her to speak, that the twist revealed itself. Jack was sitting by her bedside, his usual stiff, professional demeanor cracking just a little. He had been checking on her vitals and making small talk, but today felt different. The silence between them was thick, like there was something unsaid, something that both of them were tiptoeing around. She spoke first, her voice hoarse. "You're a good man, Jack," she said, looking up at him with tired eyes. Jack shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just doing my job, Emily." She paused, then hesitated before continuing. "You don't know this, but my father was a firefighter too. He was one of the first responders to a house fire years ago. Right around the time you started your career." Jack blinked in surprise. "I didn't know that." Emily's eyes welled up with tears. "He died in that fire. I was just a kid, but I always thought that if I met someone like him, someone who had the same kind of heart, it would be like he was still here with me, somehow." Jack's chest tightened as he listened. He hadn't expected this kind of connection, but now that it was laid out before him, it felt like the world had shifted just a little. She wasn't just another person in need. She was carrying the memory of someone he might have known, someone who had shared his own calling. "I never thought about it like that," Jack said quietly. "I just thought I was doing my job to help." Emily smiled weakly. "You are. But sometimes, Jack, we don't realize the impact we have on others until it's too late. My father saved people, and so did you. And now, you've saved me." Jack didn't know how to respond. He was starting to realize that his selfless act wasn't just about saving one life. It was part of something bigger, a cycle of kindness, of saving and being saved. It wasn't just his duty to others, but it was a way of coming to terms with his own past, his own unresolved guilt. Later that day, Jack had another unexpected encounter, this time with Sarah. She was standing in the hallway of the hospital, looking lost, like she didn't belong there. Her face was tense, and Jack could tell she had been waiting for him. "I've been trying to reach you," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I need to talk." Jack crossed his arms, uncertain of how to approach the situation. They hadn't spoken since their abrupt parting years ago, and now, here she was, caught in the web of this chaotic moment, just as much a part of his past as anything else. "You shouldn't be here, Sarah," Jack said, his voice rough. "Not now. I have to focus on what's happening with Emily." "I know," Sarah replied, glancing over her shoulder toward the room where Emily was resting. "But I couldn't just walk away. I saw how you were with her. You're still the same, Jack. You're always trying to fix things, but you never fixed us." Jack's heart ached as he heard her words. He didn't want to go down this path again. He was already dealing with so much: Emily's life, his own conflicted feelings, and now, Sarah, the ghost of a past he wasn't sure he was ready to confront. "I don't know if I can fix what happened between us, Sarah," Jack said quietly. "I tried, but I wasn't enough for you. I wasn't the person you needed me to be." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she took a step toward him. "No, Jack, I pushed you away. It wasn't you, it was me. I was afraid of losing you, afraid of never being enough. And when you stopped fighting for us, I ran." Jack's mind raced. The years of silence, the painful separation, they all came rushing back in an overwhelming flood. He wanted to reach out, to fix things, but the pain was too fresh. He didn't know if he could risk reopening old wounds, especially with everything else on his plate. But as he looked at her, really looked at her, he realized something. She had changed. They both had. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for them to try again. Not to pick up where they left off, but to rebuild something new, something better. "I don't know what comes next for us," Jack said, his voice soft, but firm. "But I'm willing to figure it out." And for the first time in years, he felt like a weight had lifted. The past didn't have to define him. He could move forward, both as a firefighter, and as a man who had learned from his mistakes. In the weeks that followed, Jack continued to visit Emily. The recovery was slow, but she was making progress. He helped her through physical therapy, staying by her side as a friend, no longer just the man who saved her, but someone who had become a part of her healing process. But as much as Emily had been a reminder of the past, she also became a catalyst for Jack's own growth. He found himself letting go of the bitterness and regret that had kept him chained to the past. Through her, he saw that even in the darkest of times, there was light to be found. That selflessness wasn't about receiving something in return. It was about doing what was right, no matter the cost. One afternoon, Emily reached out to him with a simple note that she had written, thanking him for everything. She said that because of him, she was able to forgive her father for not being there when she needed him. That was when Jack truly realized the power of his actions. That one moment of courage had not only saved her life, but also helped heal old wounds for both of them. The twist came when Emily surprised him by introducing him to her mother, who had recently learned of the connection to Jack's father. Jack didn't know why, but something about this moment felt like a full-circle moment. He was now part of a larger story, and somehow, in his own quiet way, he had healed some part of himself. Jack's life was beginning to feel like a new chapter, and just as he stood at the edge of that unknown future, he realized that his past, his mistakes, his regrets, had taught him exactly what he needed to learn. That kindness, selflessness, and understanding had the power to mend even the deepest scars. As he walked away from the hospital, a quiet sense of peace settled in his chest. He didn't need the past to define him anymore. What mattered now was the future, and the endless possibilities it held. In the end, Jack's journey was more than just a tale of heroism. It was a story of redemption and healing. Saving Emily from the burning car was only the beginning. The real rescue happened inside him, as he confronted his own unresolved past, and came to terms with his mistakes. Sometimes, doing the right thing for others doesn't come without its own personal cost. Jack gave everything in that moment of selflessness. He risked his life for a stranger, but in doing so, he was unknowingly saving himself from the weight of his own regrets. His past with Sarah had always haunted him, and the reappearance of his ex threatened to unravel everything he had worked so hard to move past. But it wasn't the heroic act that defined Jack. It was his ability to face the emotional pain and growth that followed. Through his struggles, he learned that selflessness is not always easy, but it is what allows us to heal. The connection between Jack and Emily proved that kindness often leads to more than just a debt repaid. It opens doors to unexpected second chances, even in the most unlikely of places. Just as Emily found a path to forgive her father through Jack's act of courage, Jack too found peace with his past and the possibility of a new beginning, both in his relationship with Sarah and his own understanding of what it meant to truly give of oneself. The message is clear: redemption isn't always immediate. Sometimes it's a slow, quiet process. But if we're brave enough to open our hearts to others, we find that the rewards of love, forgiveness and growth are far greater than anything we could ever expect. As Jack walked away from the wreckage of that day, he knew one thing for certain: self-sacrifice wasn't just about saving others, it was about saving yourself, and that, in the end, is what makes it all worth it. If you've ever faced a difficult decision, a moment where doing the right thing wasn't easy, remember that even in the hardest times, selflessness can lead to unexpected growth and healing. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that kindness and second chances can change everything. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more powerful real-life stories.